What are the papers making of our top story then, the upcoming release of Gilad Shalit?
Good morning, Claire. Let's start by having a look at the Israeli press, where this case has really provoked some extremely strong emotions, especially among the families of victims who died in terrorist attacks carried out by some of the prisoners who are being released. Now, in the Jerusalem Post, two mothers of those victims have written very different letters to the paper. Let's look at the first one, who says she's thrilled that Shalit is being released today. She's the mother of an Israeli soldier who was killed by Hamas in 1994, but she says she has no mixed feelings about Shalit's release, and she sympathises completely with his parents. On the other hand, though, there's the mother in the same paper of a young girl who was killed in a bomb attack on a Tel Aviv pizzeria. Now, one of the women involved in that attack is set to be released today, and the mother of the victim tells the paper that the price being paid for Shalit's release is just too high. It's a very strongly worded letter from her. She says the government is dancing in her family's blood. She says, really, that the grief suffered by the families of terrorist victims is just too strong. It lasts for decades. The government doesn't understand. And she says she will never pardon or forgive Netanyahu's government for this release. And it's Hamas really celebrating because they've won.
And even though there's a lot of support for this swap within Israel, she's far from the only one who's having doubts about this swap.
No, indeed not. There's an analysis piece, an editorial in Haaretz, which is headlined, "Prepare for the release of the next Shalit." They're saying, of course, that this is going to encourage further kidnappings because now Hamas have realised that it can work as a bargaining tactic, so we can expect more Israeli soldiers to be kidnapped. They also criticise the Israeli government quite strongly for taking so long to broker this. They say just as good a deal could have been reached immediately after Shalit's kidnap, so why wait for so many years? And they criticise Benjamin Netanyahu, saying he's trying to get political capital out of this.
Now, what about the Huffington Post? It thinks this is actually a positive thing for the peace process.
Yes, their opinion's very different. They say this is actually good for the peace process. We should be celebrating the fact that Hamas and the Israeli government have managed to sit down and come to an agreement on anything. They say it's only been possible because Fatah has kind of seized the international spotlight recently with its bid for statehood at the UN. And as a result, both Netanyahu's government and Hamas are a bit on the back foot. So they both decided it was in their interest to broker a deal. But we should hope they learn from this for the peace process in the long run, they say.
And what about the broader implications for the Middle East?
Well, there's a really interesting article in here in Libération, the French paper, which argues that actually it's the situation in Syria that has allowed this to come about. They say that because Syria is distracted with its unrest at home and a lot of the opponents to the Syrian government are actually the Muslim Brotherhood, which is close to Hamas. The Hamas leadership and the Syrian government no longer see eye to eye, whereas the Syrian government has sponsored Hamas for many years. And this is why Hamas is seeking other international negotiating partners. This is why they've agreed to broker a deal that has been arranged by Egypt, because it's a consequence, the paper says, of the Syrian unrest.
And what about Fatah? It didn't actually take part in the talks, so it's not so positive for them.
No, the Daily Beast has an article saying Mahmoud Abbas is the big loser out of all this. Of course, Fatah has no sway, really, over the Hamas militants who are holding Gilad Shalit. And recently, Mahmoud Abbas has devoted all of his energy to that Palestinian statehood bid at the UN. So that hasn't been terribly successful. And Hamas is now able to kind of spin this prisoner exchange deal, they say, to the Palestinian street as a big achievement for all Palestinians that they've achieved. Of course, the over 1,000 prisoners being released aren't all Hamas members. They're Fatah and all other Palestinian factions. So this is popular across the Palestinian field of opinion. So it's a PR coup for Hamas.
OK, thank you very much, Elena Casas, for a look at what the international papers are making of the upcoming release of Gilad Shalit.